In the cool, stark light of June 2025, the Middle East stands on the precipice of a conflict many have long feared, but honestly, few believed would come to pass. The simmering, decades-long hostility between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel has finally boiled over into direct military confrontation. What was once a shadow war, fought through proxies, sabotage, and threatening rhetoric, has now emerged into the open. The skies over both nations have been scarred by missiles and drones, and the international community holds its breath, watching a dangerous new chapter unfold. The sounds of sirens and explosions have become a grim reality for civilians who now live under the constant threat of the next strike, a terrifying manifestation of geopolitical tensions that have been building for nearly half a century. This escalation did not occur in a vacuum. It is the culmination of a sequence of events, each ratcheting up the pressure and narrowing the path to diplomacy. The year 2025 has been marked by a series of aggressive maneuvers that shattered the fragile de-escalation understandings of the past. Israeli airstrikes, once confined to Iranian assets in Syria, have now struck deep within Iranian territory, targeting what Israel claims are critical components of a clandestine nuclear weapons program. In response, Iran has unleashed its formidable missile arsenal, retaliating with strikes on Israeli military and infrastructure targets. The world is now witness to a direct state-on-state conflict between two of the region's most powerful and determined military forces, a scenario with profound and unpredictable consequences. The current crisis represents a failure of deterrence and a breakdown of the unwritten rules of engagement that had previously governed this rivalry. For years, both nations operated under a doctrine of plausible deniability, with attacks carried out covertly or through allied militias. Now, that veil has been torn away. The directness of the recent attacks signifies a strategic shift, where both Tehran and Jerusalem have calculated that the risks of inaction outweigh the dangers of open warfare. This shift has plunged the region into its most volatile state in recent memory, forcing neighboring countries and global superpowers to re-evaluate their alliances and prepare for a potential contagion of violence that could spread far beyond the borders of Iran and Israel. As we stand today, the international community is grappling with the implications. The United Nations Security Council has held emergency sessions, issuing calls for restraint that have so far gone unheeded. Global energy markets are in turmoil, reacting to the instability in a region vital to the world's oil supply. But most importantly, the human toll is beginning to mount. In cities across both countries, ordinary people are caught in the crossfire of a conflict driven by ideologies and security doctrines forged decades ago. The story of 2025 is not just one of military strategy and political maneuvering. It is the story of a region on the brink, where the long shadow of war threatens to engulf millions in darkness. The origins of this conflict can be traced back to a single transformative year, 1979. Before the Iranian Islamic Revolution, the two nations maintained quiet, even cooperative relations. The overthrow of the Shah, a key Israeli ally, and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini established a new ideological order in Tehran. The Islamic Republic redefined its foreign policy, positioning Israel as an illegitimate Zionist entity and a primary adversary in the region. This ideological shift was not merely rhetorical, it laid the foundational stone for decades of hostility. The new regime in Iran ended all formal ties with Israel and began to actively cultivate a narrative of resistance, setting the two nations on a collision course that would define Middle Eastern geopolitics for generations to come. The 1980s saw Iran translate its ideology into action by fostering the creation of Hezbollah in Lebanon. This Shia militant group, armed, trained and funded by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, became Tehran's most successful proxy force. Positioned directly on Israel's northern border, Hezbollah provided Iran with a powerful tool to exert pressure and retaliate against Israeli actions without engaging in direct state-to-state warfare. This development cemented the proxy war dynamic, where the conflict was fought on the territory of other nations, primarily Lebanon and later Syria. For Israel, this established Iran not just as a distant ideological foe, but as an immediate and tangible threat to its national security. The 2000s and 2010s were characterized by a quiet but intense escalation, largely centered on two fronts. Iran's advancing nuclear program, and its expanding military presence in Syria. Israel, viewing a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, began a campaign of covert operations. This included sophisticated cyber attacks, most notably the Stuxnet virus that damaged Iranian centrifuges, and the targeted assassinations of key Iranian nuclear scientists. Simultaneously, as Iran deepened its involvement in the Syrian civil war to support the Assad regime, Israel launched hundreds of airstrikes in Syria. These strikes were meticulously aimed at preventing Iran from establishing a permanent military foothold and transferring advanced weaponry to Hezbollah. This long and bloody prelude set the stage for the direct confrontations seen in 2025. Each action by one side was met with a reaction from the other, creating a cycle of escalating violence. The Israeli strikes in Syria degraded Iranian capabilities, but also hardened Tehran's resolve. Iran's support for its proxies surrounded Israel with hostile forces, reinforcing the Israeli belief that preemptive action was necessary for survival. The shadow war, once a sustainable strategy for managing conflict, gradually eroded the buffers between the two states. This historical road, paved with mistrust, proxy battles, and covert operations, led inexorably to the present day, where the shadows have receded to reveal a direct and... The heart of the current conflict lies Iran's nuclear program, an issue that Israel has long defined as an existential red line. For decades, Iran has pursued nuclear capabilities, insisting its intentions are purely for peaceful energy production. However, its continued enrichment of uranium, its development of advanced centrifuges, and its past research into weaponization have fueled deep suspicion in Jerusalem and other Western capitals. From Israel's perspective, the prospect of its most implacable ideological adversary acquiring the ultimate weapon is an unacceptable reality. This belief has driven Israel's policy of prevention, which has included everything from diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions to sabotage and, as seen recently, direct military strikes on nuclear facilities. Complementing this central issue are the persistent and widespread Israeli airstrikes against Iranian assets across the region. For over a decade, the Israeli Air Force has conducted a systematic campaign, primarily in Syria, to degrade Iran's military infrastructure and disrupt its supply lines to its proxies. These strikes, often referred to as the war between the wars, were designed to push Iranian forces away from Israel's borders and prevent the transfer of game-changing weapons, such as precision-guided missiles, to Hezbollah. While Israel views these actions as defensive and necessary to maintain its security, Iran sees them as acts of unprovoked aggression and a violation of sovereignty, which has fueled its desire for retribution and strengthened its resolve to build a credible deterrent. Iran's primary tool for retaliation and regional influence is its network of proxies, often referred to as the axis of resistance. This network includes powerful and well-armed groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, various militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen. Iran provides these groups with funding, training, and increasingly sophisticated weaponry, enabling them to project power and pose a multi-front threat to Israel. For Tehran, this strategy provides strategic depth and a means to challenge Israel without risking an all-out war. For Israel, these proxies represent an ever-present ring of fire, a constant source of rocket attacks and terrorist threats that are directed and supplied by a hostile state sponsor. The recent escalation to direct attacks in 2025 marks a critical turning point where these long-standing causes converged. The Israeli strikes on Iranian soil were framed as a last resort to halt the nuclear program, while Iran's missile barrages were portrayed as a necessary response to years of Israeli aggression. Each side claims to be acting defensively, trapped in a security dilemma where any move to enhance its own safety is perceived as a threat by the other. This vicious cycle of action and reaction, fueled by the nuclear issue, Israeli airstrikes, and Iran's proxy network, has created a seemingly intractable conflict that now threatens to consume the entire region in a devastating war. The conflict between Iran and Israel is not merely a dispute over territory or resources. It is rooted in fundamentally opposing political systems and worldviews. Iran, since 1979, has been an Islamic republic, a theocracy where ultimate authority rests with the supreme leader, a cleric who interprets divine law. The state's ideology is deeply intertwined with a revolutionary Shia Islam that champions resistance against what it perceives as Western imperialism and Zionist aggression. This political structure defines Israel not as a legitimate state, but as an illegitimate colonial implant in the heart of the Muslim world. This foundational belief, embedded in Iran's constitution and political rhetoric, makes a formal peace or normalization of relations under the current regime virtually impossible. In stark contrast, Israel is a parliamentary democracy, established as a Jewish state. Its political identity is shaped by the history of the Jewish people, particularly the trauma of the Holocaust, which has fostered a powerful security doctrine often summarized as "never again." Israeli democracy is vibrant and often fractious, with a wide spectrum of political parties. Yet a broad consensus exists across the mainstream political landscape regarding the existential nature of the threat posed by Iran. Israeli leaders, whether from the right, center, or left, have consistently viewed a nuclear-armed Iran as an intolerable danger to the nation's survival, framing the conflict as a struggle of a democratic state to defend itself against a totalitarian theocracy bent on its destruction. These divergent political systems inform their respective security doctrines. Iran's strategy is one of forward defense and deterrence through asymmetry. Lacking a modern air force comparable to Israel's, Tehran has invested heavily in ballistic missiles, drones, and its network of regional proxies. This doctrine aims to deter an attack by ensuring that any military action against Iran will result in a devastating, multi-front response against Israel and its allies. It is a strategy designed to offset technological inferiority with strategic depth and the credible threat of inflicting mass casualties. Iran's regional ambitions are to establish itself as the dominant power in the Middle East, leading an axis of resistance that challenges the influence of the United States and its regional partners. Israel's security doctrine, on the other hand, is built on the pillars of preemption and technological superiority. Given its small size and lack of strategic depth, Israel's military posture has always been proactive, seeking to neutralize threats before they can fully materialize on its borders. This is evident in its long-standing policy of striking Iranian targets in Syria and its recent direct attacks on Iranian soil. Israel's political rhetoric reinforces this stance, with leaders frequently invoking historical lessons to justify preemptive military action as a moral and strategic necessity. Israel's regional ambition is to ensure its security and achieve normalization with the Arab world, creating a coalition of states to counterbalance Iranian influence, a goal that has seen some success through initiatives like the Abraham Accords. When comparing the military capabilities of Israel and Iran, one finds a classic study in contrasts: Israel's technological superiority versus Iran's strategic depth and numerical strength. The Israeli Defense Forces are among the most advanced and well-trained militaries in the world. Its air force is the cornerstone of its power, featuring cutting-edge American-made aircraft like the F-35 stealth fighter, alongside heavily modified F-15s and F-16s. These platforms are equipped with sophisticated precision-guided munitions. This aerial dominance is protected by a multi-layered missile defense system, including the famous Iron Dome for short-range rockets, David's Sling for medium-range threats, and the Arrow system for ballistic missiles, creating a formidable shield against attack. Iran's military power, while technologically less advanced, is formidable due to its scale and strategic focus on asymmetric warfare. The country boasts the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, with projectiles capable of reaching any point in Israel. In recent years, Iran has also developed a vast fleet of armed drones and cruise missiles, which it has used to great effect both directly and through its proxies. Its manpower is substantial, with approximately 610,000 active personnel split between the regular army, known as the Artesh, and the ideologically driven Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC, in particular, controls Iran's most strategic assets, including its missile forces and its foreign operations wing, the Quds Force. In the cyber and naval domains, the asymmetries continue. Israel is a global cyber superpower, with its elite Unit 8200 intelligence corps often credited with some of the world's most sophisticated cyber offense operations, including the Stuxnet attack. Its navy, though smaller, is highly advanced, operating state-of-the-art submarines, widely believed to provide a second-strike nuclear capability, and corvettes designed to protect its strategic gas rigs in the Mediterranean. Iran, while having made significant strides in its own cyber warfare capabilities, primarily focuses on disruption and espionage. Its navy is a hybrid force, combining a conventional fleet with a large number of small, fast attack craft designed for swarming tactics to disrupt shipping in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Perhaps Iran's most critical military asset is its network of regional militias. Groups like Hezbollah are not mere proxies, but are themselves powerful battle-hardened armies, with Hezbollah alone estimated to possess over 150,000 rockets and missiles. This network allows Iran to project power far beyond its borders and to open multiple fronts against Israel in any conflict, compensating for its own air force's relative weakness. In essence, the balance of power is not straightforward. Israel possesses the technological edge to inflict precise and devastating damage, particularly from the air. Iran, in turn, wields the power of mass in missiles, personnel and proxies to ensure that any conflict would be punishingly costly for Israel and its allies. The Iran-Israel conflict does not exist in a regional bubble. It is deeply enmeshed in a web of global alliances and rivalries, with major world powers playing significant roles. The bedrock of Israel's international standing is its strategic alliance with the United States. This partnership provides Israel with billions of dollars in annual military aid, preferential access to advanced American weaponry, and a crucial diplomatic shield at the United Nations. In times of crisis, this relationship often translates into direct military and intelligence support, with United States assets in the region serving as a powerful backstop for Israeli operations and a deterrent against wider escalation. American political rhetoric almost universally frames its support for Israel's security as ironclad. Iran, largely isolated from the West since 1979, has cultivated its own set of strategic partnerships, primarily with Russia and China. Russia provides Iran with diplomatic cover at the United Nations Security Council and has become an increasingly important supplier of advanced military technology, particularly in the wake of the war in Ukraine. China, on the other hand, is Iran's primary economic lifeline, purchasing vast quantities of Iranian oil in defiance of United States sanctions and investing in its infrastructure. This support, while not a formal military alliance, ensures that Iran is not entirely alone on the world stage, providing it with the economic and military means to withstand international pressure and pursue its regional ambitions. The stance of the Arab Gulf states, such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, has undergone a dramatic transformation in recent years. Historically aligned against Israel, these Sunni monarchies now view Iran's rising influence and nuclear ambitions as the primary threat to their own security. This shared threat perception has led to a quiet and, in some cases, open realignment with Israel. They engage in covert intelligence sharing and diplomatic coordination, creating a de facto anti-Iran coalition in the region. While they publicly call for restraint to avoid a regional war that would devastate their economies, their strategic interests are more closely aligned with Israel's goal of containing Iranian power than ever before. Caught in the middle of these power blocks are international organizations like the United Nations and the European Union. The United Nations consistently serves as a forum for debate and diplomacy, with its Secretary General repeatedly calling for de-escalation and adherence to international law. However, its ability to enforce its resolutions is limited, often paralyzed by vetoes from permanent Security Council members like the United States and Russia. The European Union, meanwhile, attempts to play a mediatory role, torn between its security concerns over Iran's nuclear program and its desire to preserve diplomatic channels and prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. These institutions reflect the world's deep divisions, advocating for peace while lacking the unified power to impose it on two nations locked in a determined conflict. As of June 2025, the direct conflict between Iran and Israel has moved from a theoretical danger to a grim, tangible reality. Recent Israeli airstrikes have reportedly targeted not only military and nuclear sites, but also critical infrastructure, leading to power outages and disruptions in major Iranian cities. In retaliation, Iranian missile and drone attacks have breached Israeli airspace, causing casualties and damage to civilian areas. The toll, while still being counted, is measured in lives lost, families displaced, and communities gripped by fear. In both nations, the rhythm of daily life has been shattered, replaced by the wail of air raid sirens and the anxious wait for news of loved ones. The conflict, once fought by soldiers and spies in distant lands, is now being felt by ordinary citizens in their own homes. The risk of further escalation is dangerously high. Experts warn of a war of attrition, where each side feels compelled to respond to the other's attacks, creating a spiral of violence with no clear off-ramp. A significant concern is the potential activation of Iran's most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, which could open a devastating second front on Israel's northern border. Such a scenario would likely draw in the United States, which has naval assets positioned in the region to support Israel and protect international shipping. A wider regional war could quickly spiral out of control, engulfing Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and triggering a global economic crisis by disrupting oil supplies from the Persian Gulf. The humanitarian impact extends far beyond the immediate casualties. In Iran, a population already suffering under severe economic sanctions now faces the added burden of wartime shortages and infrastructure collapse. In Israel, the psychological toll of constant missile threats is immense, forcing large parts of the population into bomb shelters and disrupting the nation's economy. Across the region, the conflict threatens to create new waves of refugees and exacerbate existing humanitarian crises, particularly in war-torn Syria and unstable Lebanon. The resources being poured into military hardware and operations are resources diverted from education, healthcare, and human development, ensuring that the consequences of this war will be felt for decades to come, even if the fighting were to stop tomorrow. In the final analysis, understanding this conflict requires looking beyond the geopolitical chess game and seeing the human faces on both sides. It demands a recognition that behind the government's statements and military doctrines are millions of civilians who yearn for security and peace. The path forward is fraught with peril, and the choices made today by leaders in Tehran, Jerusalem, and capitals around the world will determine whether the region descends further into a catastrophic war or can find a way back from the brink. The cost of failure is measured not in strategic losses, but in human lives, and that is a price the world can ill afford to pay.